right, we're taking a look at the Unit 1 study guide. What I do for the study guides is I go through the study guide in pretty significant detail and try to help you prepare for your exam. The first question in the, now I'm also not a film major or anything like that, so it's a little rough, but it gets the job done. The directions for the study guide are to complete the study guide. It's not optional. Utilize materials completed in class as well as online resources, and check your work using the Unit 1 study guide YouTube videos. I also have the answer keys to the study guide located in a binder in my classroom, so you can use those too. The first question on page 1 of the Unit 1 study guide is, what are the 5 steps of the scientific method? List them and provide an explanation of what happens in each steps. I did this on a separate page. You can pause and come back as often as you want to. But the scientific method, we state the problem, and the problem is what you are trying to solve or the question that you're trying to answer. So for an example, you could say, why does my locker smell bad? The second step of the scientific method is to do some preliminary research that will help you form a testable hypothesis. Your hypothesis has to be testable, okay? And it also needs to be written in an if-then statement. So for my example, I could say, if I take my track shoes out of my locker, then it will not smell bad. I can test that. I'm going to design a controlled experiment. A controlled experiment has a control, also known as a constant, and it tests one variable at a time. I'm not going to change a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not going to put air freshener in my locker and take out my track shoes and hang up, light a candle or anything like that. Like, I'm just doing one thing. I'm testing one variable to see if that's what causes my locker to stink. So in my experiment, I'm going to remove my track shoes and check back the very next day. The fourth step of the scientific method is making observations and collecting data. Data can be 2 different kinds, qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative data we want to use whenever we possibly can, because we love quantitative data because it has a number attached to it. All right, how long does it take for me to get to school? It takes me 11 minutes to get to school. How tall you are, things like that. Things that you can measure are quantitative data, and they're great. Qualitative data we use when we need to, and it includes qualities of things. Did I write? Yeah, that's qualitative. Colors, smells, sounds, things that you can't necessarily attach a number to. And in this case, it's a qualitative observation we're making. After removing my track shoes, my locker did not smell bad, so it smelled better. Finally, for the 5th step of the scientific method, we're going to look at the conclusion and design any revisions that we might consider for the next time. Your conclusion is a restatement of the hypothesis. You're going to support or refute your hypothesis. So in this case, I would say my track shoes were making my locker stink. In the future, I will keep my track shoes in my gym locker. So there's that. Question number 2 in the study guide. List the following in order from smallest concept to largest. Next to each of them, provide a definition and identify if they can ever be changed. All right, so a hypothesis and then a theory and a law. That's the order: hypothesis, theory, then law. Hypothesis is an explanation based on limited evidence or a starting point for an explanation. That doesn't mean a hypothesis isn't valid. That just means that it's testable, and you're planning on conducting an experiment around your hypothesis. Your theory is an idea based on generally accepted principles. So for instance, the theory of evolution was come up Charles Darwin is given credit for coming up with the theory of evolution in his book on Origin of the Species. But when he developed this theory of evolution, he really didn't even have the information that we have today about molecular DNA and things like that. So it's a theory based on generally accepted principles. A law is a particular observation that always occurs under certain conditions. It's kind of a given that requires no further support. So, for instance, the law of gravity. The second part of the question here is, can these ever be changed? And the answer is yes. Anything can be changed if new information is presented. So if the law of gravity ever fails you, then we have to throw that out and kind of start again. But any of these conditions, a hypothesis, a theory, and a law can be changed in the presence of new information. When developing a good hypothesis, it has to be testable. And the question, which is, what are the goals of, explain why scientific investigations and experiments are done. I wrote that on a separate sheet. Scientific investigations and using the scientific method. The scientific method is a methodological, uniform, standard, universally accepted way of solving problems and discovering solutions to questions about the natural world. If you're a scientist, if you are interested in learning more about science, if you just like the way that scientists think, then you adhere to the concepts and the principles that are put forth in the scientific method. It keeps everything standardized, and if you utilize the scientific method properly, you have the data, you have the evidence to support your conclusions. You're not just making stuff up. The goal of science, the goal of doing experiments, your overarching goal when we write a lab report and when we follow the scientific method, our goal is to hope that we can publish our results in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. You want to publish your results in a scientific journal so that other scientists can get their hands on it, try to support the information that you shared, or refute the information that you shared, or change it, or kind of like add to it, build upon your idea. You want your idea to be planted in a scientific journal and be able to grow as an idea and just become something that's commonly accepted as something that has a lot of evidence to support it. And the way for that to happen is for you to publish that in a scientific journal. It allows other experts to verify and support your results. So that's page 1 of your study guide. I am going to stop here and go to page 2 in the next video.